The Zephyrian High Council had made their position crystal clear during the first interspecies adoption hearing. No alien species could possibly understand the complex neurological and emotional needs of Zephyrian young. Their cubs required specific pheromone signatures, telepathic bonding rituals, and a deep understanding of their pack mentality that only another Zephyrian could provide. Dr. Sarah Chen sat quietly in the back of the galactic courtroom, her weathered hands folded in her lap, as the council's spokesman Kathvara gestured dramatically with his 4 arms. His silver fur bristled with indignation as he spoke. The human woman may have spent 30 years studying xenobiology, Kathvara declared, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that made all Zephyrian speech sound like distant singing. But she lacks the biological mechanisms necessary to form the sacred parent bond. Without this connection, any Zephyrian cub in her care would suffer irreversible psychological damage. The courtroom murmured with agreement from various alien dignitaries. Sarah had expected this. For 2 years, she had been fighting for the right to adopt Zix, a Zephyrian cub whose parents had died in a mining accident on Kepler 442b. The little one had been languishing in the state care facility on Proxima Station, too traumatized to bond with any of the prospective Zephyrian families who had tried to take him in. Sarah had first met Zix during her research sabbatical, studying comparative child development across species. The moment she saw the small, fox-like creature huddled in the corner of his containment cell, something in her heart had shifted. His large, violet eyes held the same look she had seen in human orphans back on Earth, a desperate hope wrapped in protective numbness. Against all protocols, she had started visiting Zix regularly. She couldn't communicate through pheromones or telepathy, but she had something else: patience, and an intuitive understanding of trauma that transcended species barriers. She would sit outside his cell for hours, simply reading aloud from human children's books, her voice steady and warm. Slowly, Zix had begun to respond. First, he would creep closer to the barrier when she arrived. Then, he started making soft chirping sounds when she read particularly engaging passages. Within months, he was pressing his small paws against the transparent wall whenever she had to leave, his eyes following her down the corridor. The facility's Zephyrian caretakers were baffled. None of their traditional bonding techniques had worked, yet this human had somehow reached the traumatized cub without any of their species' natural advantages. "The council fails to recognize," Sarah finally said, rising to address the court, "that parenthood isn't about biological compatibility. It's about commitment, understanding, and love, qualities that aren't limited to any single species." Kathvara's ears flattened against his skull. "Sentiment cannot replace biological necessity, human. Our young require—" "I know what Zephyrian young require," Sarah interrupted gently. "I've spent the last 2 years learning. I've studied your bonding, rituals, your pack dynamics, your nutritional needs. I've learned to recognize the 73 different distress calls a Zephyrian cub can make. I may not be able to produce pheromones, but I've found other ways." She pulled out a small device from her jacket. "I've developed synthetic pheromone generators based on Zix's specific needs. I've learned to interpret the subtle body language that replaces telepathic communication. And most importantly, I've learned that sometimes what a traumatized child needs isn't another member of their own species trying to force traditional bonds. They need someone willing to meet them where they are." The judge, a tall, crystalline being from the Andromedian system, leaned forward with interest. "You claim to have evidence of successful bonding?" Sarah nodded to the bailiff, who activated the courtroom's holographic display. Security footage from the care facility began playing, showing Sarah's first tentative interactions with Zix. The court watched in fascination as months of patient work unfolded in fast forward. Sarah learning to mimic Zephyrian comfort gestures, Zix gradually emerging from his shell, and finally, the moment that had stunned the facility staff, Zix performing the traditional Zephyrian adoption ritual, offering Sarah a small braided cord made from his own fur. That's impossible, Keth Vera whispered, his 4 eyes wide with shock. The offering of the bond cord. It can only be given to true family. The footage continued, showing Sarah and Zix together over the following months. The cub, once listless and withdrawn, was now vibrant and playful. He had grown stronger, healthier, and had even begun displaying advanced cognitive development that surpassed normal benchmarks for his age group. Dr. Yenna Toth, the facility's chief psychologist, appeared on screen in a recorded testimony. In 40 years of working with traumatized Zephyrian young, I have never seen such a complete recovery. The human female somehow provided exactly what Zix needed, not despite being a different species, but perhaps because of it. Sometimes, healing requires a completely different perspective. The courtroom fell silent as the judge deliberated. Finally, the crystalline being spoke. The evidence suggests that this human has not only bonded successfully with the Zephyrian cub, but has provided superior care compared to traditional placements. The court rules in favor of the adoption petition. Keth Vara's translator device crackled as he struggled to find words. Several other Zephyrian council members were frantically whispering among themselves, their worldview fundamentally shaken. Sarah walked out of the courtroom. Zix bounded toward her from the gallery where he had been waiting with a court guardian. He leaped into her arms, his small body warm and trusting against her chest. He chirped softly in her ear, the Zephyrian equivalent of saying, "Mama." "I know, little one," she whispered back, unconsciously using the Zephyrian maternal tone she had spent months perfecting. "We're going home." Behind them, other interspecies families who had been following the case began to murmur with hope. If a human could successfully raise a Zephyrian cub, what other impossible combinations might be possible? Sarah Chen had never set out to revolutionize galactic adoption policy. She had simply seen a child who needed love and refused to accept that species barriers could prevent her from providing it. In doing so, she had quietly dismantled one of the galaxy's most deeply held prejudices, one patient day at a time. The universe, it seemed, was about to become a much more connected place.